Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Anne Reardon, and in this episode we're going to be testing, are air fryers a waste of money? So, full disclosure, right at the beginning, I was actually sent an air fryer for free by Tautronics. So for me, I'm more testing, am I actually going to use this thing rather than should I buy one? Because I've already got one. But what I want to do is put it through a full gamut of testing, and I'm going to compare it to a deep fryer and also to a convection fan forced oven, so we can see, is it worth getting an air fryer and using one or not. Now, what I'm going to do for this testing first up is I'm going to use 500 grams of store-bought frozen chips, and the reason I'm doing that is it's very easy for me to get lots of them, to run lots of testing to compare each model and see how it goes. So first of all, of course, for each appliance it needs preheating. The air fryer says that it needs only 3 minutes to preheat it up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Once that's done, we can add the chips straight out of the freezer and tip them in. There's plenty of room in there, it's quite a big basket, and then turn that on to 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. Now apparently you're supposed to stir or shake them halfway through cooking time so they can cook evenly, so I'll do that. And then let them cook the rest of the time. As well as looking at how long it takes to cook the chips in each of these appliances, I also want to know how much power it's using. So for that, I've got an energy meter that I'm going to plug in and use with each of them so that I can see exactly what's going through. It's not as simple as just multiplying the wattage of the device by the time that you have it on for when it comes to this sort of appliance, because in the case of all three of them, I'll show you the air fryer for example, while it's heating up, it draws a lot of power to get up to the right temperature, and then once it's at that temperature, the heating element will switch off and the amount of power needed will slow down, and then when it gets too cold again, it will turn the heating element back on. It just cycles back through that, and the oven does the same thing. The deep fryer does the same thing with its heating element, just to keep it at the exact same temperature. So what we'll do is we'll use the meter to measure exactly how much power is needed. After 20 minutes in the air fryer, these chips look golden and yummy and pretty good. Now let's compare that. Time to deep fry some chips. And for that, of course, we're going to need oil. And I mean a lot of oil. Put the lid on and wait for that to heat up. Now my deep fryer took 12 minutes to heat the oil up to the right temperature, and now we can add those chips in. I'm using the exact same amount of chips as I used in the air fryer, and they are all coming straight from the freezer, so they're the same temperature. And after only 5 minutes, the chips are golden and crunchy, and that is why fast food restaurants use deep fryers, because it's fast. So that is ideal when you're trying to get food out to customers quickly, but that's not necessarily ideal when it comes to your health. Obviously, these have a lot more oil in them. The deep fried chips have 4 tablespoons more fat in them compared to the ones cooked in the air fryer. You'd need to go for a 30-minute run or a 2-hour walk to burn off just the energy that was in that extra amount of fat that was in the chips. I don't really have time for a 2-hour walk, so I'd rather eat the air fried ones myself. Now, if we take the drawer out of an air fryer and tip it upside down, you can see it has a heating element and a fan to circulate the air. And if I show you inside my convection oven, you can see it has a heating element and a fan to circulate the air. So an air fryer is, of course, not a fryer. It doesn't fry the food in fat. It is basically a mini convection oven. So is there any point having an air fryer? Well, let's bake the chips in the oven so we can compare and see how that goes. After preheating the oven, which took just under 10 minutes, I put the chips in at the exact same temperature for the exact same amount of time that they took to cook in the air fryer. And after 20 minutes, they don't look done. So I gave them an extra 5 minutes. And here's the air fried chips, the deep fried, and the oven baked. And as you can see, they still don't look crispy. I just gave up on them because they were taking so long. So why did the oven take so much longer to cook the chips than the air fryer did? Well, at first I thought maybe it's just because the element is closer to the chips in the air fryer, so it's like being on a higher shelf in the oven. Maybe it'll brown quicker. So let's try that. I moved the baking tray up to the same distance away from the heating element that it was in the air fryer, preheated it, and then gave them 20 minutes in the oven. And they were still not brown and crispy like they were in the air fryer. They actually needed an additional 10 minutes to get them up to the same amount of brownness and crispness. So why is that? Well, I am assuming it's because it is a smaller area and the sides are closer to the chips and the heat is reflecting off the sides as well because the sides get hot, whereas in the oven the sides are out here. They're not going to be as close to the chips to brown them. That's my theory. If you've got a different theory, let me know. I'd love to hear it. But definitely the air fryer is much faster at baking the chips than is the oven. So let's look then at the electricity use for each of these devices and see how it compares. So including preheating time, the air fryer took 23 minutes to cook the chips and used 0.45 kilowatt hours of electricity. The deep fryer took a $20 bottle of oil and 15 minutes overall, including the preheating time, and 0.1 kilowatt hours of power. So it was very efficient in electricity use, but inefficient in that you had to pay for the oil, and also then of course we're eating that oil, so not the best, healthiest option. The oven took 40 minutes, including preheating time, and used a whopping 1.22 kilowatt hours of power. So if you pay the electricity bill in your house, you probably just sat up and paid attention to that. That is a big difference. So how much difference does that actually make over a year? Well, if you were to use the air fryer once a day to heat something up, say you've got teenagers in the house like I do who like to make themselves a pie or a sausage roll or some hot chips like we just saw for lunch, and they're baking for one person, forget about if you're baking dinner in it as well. I'm just saying just once a day using it for that short amount of time. Over a year, that makes a difference of 281 kilowatt hours, which depending where you live with Australia's rates is between $77 and about $115 worth of power. So it's going to pay for itself in just 1 year. So because it is a smaller oven, essentially, the smaller it is, the less power you need to heat that area up. So you're going to save electricity. So if you're making something that you can do in the air fryer instead of the oven, it's a good idea to do it in the air fryer. So that brings me to the next question. What can you and what can't you do in an air fryer? What if you don't even have an oven? What if you're in a college dorm or you're somewhere where you're renting and your oven doesn't work? Can you bake in an air fryer? So let's test out a few different recipes and see what works. I'm going to start with something simple. Let's start with a packet brownie mix. Now you could either bake it in a baking tin, a 7-inch tin fits inside here, or I'm going to try lining the base with baking paper. Well, it's not actually the base, it's the basket bit which actually comes out to make it easy for washing. And then tip the mixture in and spread it out. The packet says to bake it at 320 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on it in case the brownie cooks faster like the chips did as well. Now after 20 minutes, let's have a sneak peek. It's looking nice, but not done, so I'll put it back in. Now at 30 minutes, it's looking done on top, but if I insert a knife and pull it out, we can see it is still not cooked on the inside. So normally in the oven, I'd say just to put some foil gently resting on top, and that's going to protect the top from over browning. But you can't do that in an air fryer because the foil can get sucked up into the element. So instead, I'm just going to use a tin and tip it upside down and put it on top so the air can still get around, but it's going to protect the top from overcooking. Time's up and I can smell brownie. Here it is. Looks pretty good. Here's the brownie that's been cooked in the oven, and you can see the inside of it there. Looks yummy and gooey and lovely. And here is the one that is cooked in the air fryer. Obviously the outside shape of it is not as perfect because it wasn't in a tin, but the inside looks just like gooey, yummy brownie. I think they both taste very much the same. So yes, you can bake brownies in an air fryer. What about a quick dessert? If I get some puff pastry and some tinned apple and fold that over and just seal it in with a little bit of water and press it down with a fork, and then pop 2 of those into the air fryer, and look at that. Yum. That smells good too. They'd be really nice served with a little bit of ice cream. So you can do some desserts in the air fryer now. I really want to push the limits here and try macarons. Macarons are very finicky. They like to be baked in the middle of the oven, not the top, so that could be an issue. And they also like a very consistent, very even temperature throughout the whole oven. Otherwise, it just doesn't work so well. So I'm not expecting these to work at all, but I like to push the limits, so let's give it a go. Macarons also have to be banged on the bench. The tray has to be dropped a few times to stop them cracking. So I'm going to pipe some onto a little piece of baking paper that's the size of the base of the air fryer, and then drop the actual tray onto the bench a few times just to get rid of any of those air bubbles. And now getting it from there into the bottom of the air fryer is going to be rather tricky. I'm just going to try picking it up and then dropping it in. Yes! It worked. I'm not sure if that would work every time, but it worked that time. Okay, let's bake them in the air fryer and see how they go. Now, because macarons are very finicky on temperature, you're not supposed to open the oven while they're cooking, or the inside can drop and you end up with hollow macarons. So there's no window for me to look inside. So I'm just going to wait the full time, which is not ideal in an air fryer because it does tend to cook a bit faster. I don't know. We'll see how they go. And let's look inside. Nope, they're overdone, so it's cooking macarons faster as well. They don't look too bad though, so I'm going to try another batch, and with these ones I'm just going to put them in for less time and open it up and see how we go. They actually look better than I thought they would. They don't have much of a foot, but they're not too bad. Here are the ones baked in the oven. And here are the air fryer ones. So they're not quite as pretty and perfect as the oven baked ones, but if you were in a dorm room craving some macarons, these are gonna hit the spot. You can watch more How to Cook That episodes by clicking on any of the videos here, and subscribe to How to Cook That and hit the notification bell so you know about future episodes. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting this channel. Your support means so much to me. You guys are absolute legends. I really appreciate it. Make it a great week by being kind to others, and I'll see you on Friday.